Sunday morning light filtered through the windows of my 800-square-foot apartment in downtown Boston, painting golden rectangles across the hardwood floors I'd refinished myself last summer. Coffee steamed in my favorite mug, a simple white one from a thrift store that had somehow survived 3 moves and countless hurried mornings. I padded across the kitchen in bare feet, savoring the quiet. No roommates arguing over dishes, no landlord threatening eviction notices, just me, Avery Mitchell, 32 years old, in the space I'd fought for every single day of the past 5 years. Every detail here told a story of sacrifice. The kitchen cabinets I'd painted sage green during late nights after 12-hour workdays. The vintage dining table rescued from a garage sale and restored with my own hands. The small bookshelf housing financial planning texts alongside dog-eared novels I'd bought secondhand throughout college. I could still remember the moment I received the keys, how my hands shook as I unlocked the door for the first time. I'd stood in the empty space and cried, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of finally having something that couldn't be taken away, something that was mine. The promotion to senior consultant had come 3 months ago. Along with the financial security I'd dreamed of since I was 17, my emergency fund was solid, retirement accounts growing steadily. For the first time in my adult life, I was planning a vacation, my first in 5 years. Life was stable, predictable, and entirely on my terms. Until the doorbell rang. The sound cut through my peaceful morning routine, unexpected and somehow ominous. Through the peephole, I saw them, my parents standing in the hallway, my father shifting impatiently from foot to foot, my mother's hands wringing her purse strap. As I opened the door, the past 15 years collapsed into a single, vivid memory. I was 17 again, sitting at our kitchen table under the harsh, yellow overhead light. My acceptance letter to Northeastern University lay beside my father's folded hands. The partial scholarship not quite enough to cover everything, but I had my college fund money my grandparents had started, supplemented by my parents over the years. Something's happened with Justin. My mother had begun, her fingers nervously twisting her wedding ring. Your brother got involved with some gambling. My father cut to the chase. He owes dangerous people a lot of money. How much? I'd asked, already sensing where this conversation was heading. $30,000, the exact amount sitting in my college fund. We need to use your college fund, my mother said softly. Just temporarily. We'll pay it back before you start school in the fall. Family comes first, they'd always taught me, so I nodded. The money was never repaid. That fall, instead of moving into a dorm room, I rented a tiny room in a house with 5 other students. I worked 2 jobs, waiting tables at a diner in the mornings and bartending at night while carrying a full course load. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Each semester was a financial tightrope walk. I applied for every scholarship, took on extra shifts, ate ramen for weeks straight, and sometimes chose between textbooks and groceries. Meanwhile, Justin dropped out of community college and lived at home, working occasional odd jobs between extended periods of unemployment. Now, 15 years later, they stood at my door again. Surprise visit, I said, forcing a smile as I let them in. My mother, Karen, hugged me tightly, her perfume the same floral scent she'd worn my entire life, momentarily transporting me back to childhood. My father, Robert, gave a stiff nod, his eyes already scanning my apartment. Nice place you've got here, he commented. But something in his tone felt off, almost resentful. After college, I'd landed an entry-level position at a financial consulting firm. The irony wasn't lost on me advising others on financial security when my own had been so precarious. But I excelled, partly because I understood firsthand the consequences of poor financial decisions. I'd lived with 4 roommates in a cramped apartment for 3 years, saving every penny possible. When I finally qualified for a mortgage on this modest 1-bedroom apartment 5 years ago, I'd cried upon receiving the keys, the first tangible proof that my hard work was paying off. Coffee, I offered, trying to ease the awkwardness. "We don't have time for coffee," my father replied sharply. My mother shot him a look. "What Robert means is that we have a lot to discuss." Over the years, my relationship with my family had become cordial but distant. Holiday visits, occasional phone calls, but always with clear boundaries. Justin continued his cycle of jobs and debts, with my parents always stepping in to rescue him. We settled in my small living room, my parents on the sofa while I took the armchair across from them. My mother's hands twisted nervously in her lap, a familiar signal that bad news was coming. "How have you been, Avery?" my mother asked. "The apartment looks lovely." "Thank you. I've been good. Just got a promotion. Actually, that's wonderful, honey." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Enough small talk," my father interrupted. "We need to discuss Justin." The mention of my brother's name sent a chill through me. Years of experience had taught me that conversations starting this way never ended well. "What about him?" I asked cautiously. My father cleared his throat. "Your brother is in trouble. Serious trouble." "What kind of trouble?" Though I already knew the answer, my mother jumped in. "He got involved with some investments, a business opportunity that seemed promising." "Gambling," my father clarified, his voice tight with frustration. "Started with cryptocurrency schemes, ended up at casinos trying to win it back." The familiar story unfolded. Justin had convinced some friends to invest in a business venture, something involving cryptocurrency that my parents didn't fully understand. When the venture failed, he tried gambling to recoup the losses, spiraling deeper into debt. "How much?" I asked the same question I'd asked at 17, $50,000. My father answered. I nearly choked. 50. My mother nodded miserably. "Some of the people he borrowed from aren't nice people. Avery, they're threatening legal action, and worse." "Where's Justin now?" "Staying at our place," my mother replied. "He's too afraid to go to his apartment." My father leaned forward. "We've done everything we can." We emptied our savings, even took a second mortgage on the house, but it's not enough. And we're too old to qualify for more loans. My mother continued. The sinking feeling in my stomach intensified. I already knew what was coming, but part of me still hoped I was wrong. "What exactly are you asking me?" My father's eyes locked onto mine. "We need you to sell your apartment." The words hung in the air, bold and outrageous. "Sell my apartment," I repeated, certain I'd misheard. "It's the only way," my mother pleaded. "Justin could go to jail, or worse." "You've got equity," my father continued as if explaining a simple math problem. "Property values in this area have gone up. You'd make a profit enough to cover Justin's debts." "And where exactly would I live?" I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "You could rent for a while," my mother suggested, "or move back home until you save up again." "Move back home? I'm 32 years old with a career in Boston. I can't commute 3 hours each way from Hartford." "You'd figure something out." My father dismissed. "This is family we're talking about." "And what about Justin? What's his plan to pay me back?" My father waved his hand dismissively. "He'll get back on his feet. He always does." "Always does," I echoed incredulously. "When has he ever stood on his own 2 feet without you bailing him out?" "Don't talk about your brother that way," my mother admonished. "We're not asking, Avery." My father's voice hardened. "It's family money anyway." Family money. The phrase hit me like a slap. "I worked 3 jobs through college after you took my college fund for Justin's gambling debts. I worked 60-hour weeks for years to save for this place. How exactly is this family money?" "We raised you," my father countered, his face reddening. "We put a roof over your head, food on the table. You wouldn't have anything without us." The sheer audacity of his statement left me momentarily speechless. The anger and betrayal I thought I'd processed years ago came rushing back with renewed intensity. "I think you should leave," I said quietly, fighting to maintain my composure. "We're not leaving until this is settled," my father insisted. "There's nothing to settle. I'm not selling my apartment, not for Justin, not for anyone." My mother began to cry soft sniffles that gradually grew into sobs. It was a familiar tactic, one that had worked countless times when I was younger. "Do you want your brother to end up dead?" she asked between sobs. "Is that what you want?" The emotional manipulation was so transparent, yet still effective. Doubt crept in. Was I being selfish? Was property more important than my brother's safety? But another voice in my head, the one that had guided me through years of self-reliance, reminded me that this wasn't about the apartment. This was about an endless cycle that would continue as long as I allowed it. "I'll think about it," I finally said, just to end the conversation. "I need time." My father stood, taking my words as capitulation. "We'll need an answer by the end of the week. Time isn't something Justin has a lot of right now." As I closed the door behind them, the weight of their expectations pressed down on me. But this time, something else was emerging alongside the familiar feelings of resentment and guilt. Determination. 3 days after my parents' unexpected visit, my phone rang incessantly. Each call from them went unanswered as I tried to process my feelings and consider my options. I sat on the floor of my apartment, looking around at the space I'd built from nothing. I called the one person who had seen me through every family crisis since college, my best friend, Zoe Sullivan. "They did what?" Zoe exclaimed after I explained the situation. "They want me to sell my apartment to pay off Justin's gambling debts," I repeated, still hardly believing it myself. "And your father actually said it was family money. He also threatened to cut me off from the family if I don't do it." Zoe snorted. "What exactly would you be losing the privilege of bailing out your brother every few years?" Her bluntness made me laugh despite everything. "When you put it that way..." "Seriously, Avery, this is insane. You ate ramen for dinner 4 nights a week for 2 years to save for the down payment." 4 nights, I corrected. "Wednesday was splurge night. I added an egg." We both laughed, but quickly sobered. "What are you going to do?" Zoe asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to tell them to go to hell. But then I think about Justin facing these loan sharks or going to jail. That's exactly what they want you to think. They're manipulating you with fear. But what if something really does happen to him?" Zoe sighed. "Avery, I love you, but you need to recognize the pattern here. Every few years there's a crisis with Justin. Every time it's life or death, every time you or your parents bail him out, and every time nothing changes." Her words hit home. The pattern was undeniable. "That's not on you," Zoe said firmly. "Justin is 35 years old. His choices are his responsibility." After we hung up, I couldn't sleep. I needed to break the cycle, but I also needed to be strategic about it. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and a cup of coffee growing cold beside me. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the very space my parents wanted me to sacrifice. But instead of despair, I felt a clarity I'd never experienced before. I was done being the victim. The first thing I did was something I'd never done before I fought back with data. For hours, I dug through old bank statements, tax returns, and financial records scattered across my dining table. Each document told a story of sacrifice, of a young woman giving and giving while receiving nothing in return. I created a spreadsheet, methodically documenting every dollar my parents had taken or that I'd spent bailing out Justin over the years. The numbers were worse than I'd remembered. My college fund, $30,000. Interest that money would have earned over 15 years at a conservative 4% return, approximately $22,000. The defaulted loan I co-signed when Justin needed a car, $12,000. The resulting credit score damage, higher interest rates on everything from my student loans to my mortgage, approximately $8,000. Emergency money sent during various crises, at least $15,000. The security deposit I'd covered when Justin got evicted, $2,500. Car repairs I'd paid for when he couldn't, $800. When I finished, I stared at the screen in disbelief. The total was staggering $91,173. I printed the spreadsheet, then created a second document, a timeline of every bailout, every crisis, every time Justin had faced consequences only to have them swept away by our parents' intervention. But data alone wouldn't be enough. I needed a plan. I spent Tuesday afternoon researching gambling addiction recovery programs in the Hartford area. I called 3 facilities, speaking with intake coordinators about their success rates, their approaches, their requirements. I wasn't just looking for any program. I wanted the best, the most comprehensive, the one that would actually force Justin to confront his demons rather than just pay lip service to recovery. Wednesday. I took a half-day off work and drove to downtown Boston to meet with Margaret Chen, a lawyer who specialized in family financial agreements. Her office was sleek and professional, the kind of place that commanded respect. "I need to structure a formal loan agreement," I told her, explaining the situation. "Something that protects me but also helps my brother understand that this isn't charity. It's a business transaction with real consequences." Margaret listened intently, taking notes. "You want accountability measures," she said when I finished. "Clear terms, payment schedules, and consequences for default." "Exactly. I want it to feel real because it is real." She nodded approvingly. "Too many families operate on handshake agreements that mean nothing. Legal documentation forces everyone to take it seriously." Thursday morning brought the expected text from my mother. "Justin is staying with us now. We need to meet, please." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed my response. "I'll be there Saturday at 10 a.m. All 3 of you need to be there." No explanation, no negotiation, no room for argument. That afternoon, I met with Dr. Patricia Williams, a financial counselor who specialized in addiction recovery. Her practice was located in a converted Victorian house near Back Bay, warm and inviting, yet professional. "Gambling addiction is often about more than just the thrill," she explained as we discussed Justin's situation. "It's about avoiding responsibility, about the fantasy that one big win will solve all problems. Recovery requires facing reality, often for the first time." "What would you recommend for someone in his situation?" "Complete honesty. No more family bailouts without strings attached. He needs to understand the true cost of his addiction, not just financially, but emotionally, relationally." I hired her on the spot to work with Justin, contingent on his agreement to my terms. Friday evening. I sat in my apartment with 3 manila envelopes spread across my coffee table. One contained the financial documentation, 15 years of family dysfunction reduced to cold, hard numbers. The second held the loan agreement Margaret had drafted, complete with payment schedules and default clauses. The third contained information about Dr. Williams's program and the gambling addiction recovery facility. I poured myself a glass of wine and walked to my bedroom window, looking out over the city lights. Tomorrow would change everything. Either my family would finally understand that love didn't mean endless enabling, or I would learn once and for all where I truly stood in their priorities. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't going to let guilt or manipulation drive my financial decisions. I was taking control of the narrative, setting terms that protected both my financial security and my self-respect. My phone buzzed with another text from my mother. "Please, Avery, just come with an open heart." I turned the phone face down without responding. I'd been coming with an open heart for 15 years. Tomorrow, I was coming with a backbone. Saturday morning arrived gray and overcast, matching my mood as I loaded the 3 manila envelopes into my car. The drive to Hartford felt longer than usual. My childhood neighborhood looking smaller and shabbier than I remembered. Every familiar landmark, the corner store where I'd bought penny candy, the park where I'd played alone while Justin got rides to soccer practice, reminded me of a lifetime of being second priority. I pulled into the driveway of my parents' modest colonial, its white paint peeling slightly around the windows. Dad's old pickup truck sat beside Mom's sedan, and I could see Justin's beat-up Honda Civic parked on the street, probably because the bank was threatening repossession. Before I could ring the doorbell, my father opened it. He'd been waiting by the window, his face grim and determined. He wore his serious conversation expression, the same one from 15 years ago when they'd asked for my college fund. "Avery," he said curtly, stepping aside. Behind him stood my mother, wringing her hands nervously, and for the first time in 2 years, my brother Justin. The sight of him was shocking. His normally well-maintained appearance had deteriorated drastically, unwashed hair hanging limply around his face, bloodshot eyes darting everywhere except toward me, clothes that hung loosely on his diminished frame. The confident swagger I'd both resented and envied for years was nowhere to be seen. This wasn't the golden child who could do no wrong. This was a broken man who looked older than his 35 years. "Justin," I said simply, acknowledging his presence. He mumbled something that might have been, "Hey," without making eye contact. "Come in," my father said, his voice carrying an undertone of impatience. "We have a lot to discuss." We filed into the kitchen, the same room where my fate had been decided 15 years earlier. The yellow overhead light still cast harsh shadows. The faded floral tablecloth still covered the scratched wooden surface. I set my 3 envelopes on the table like a poker player revealing her hand. My parents took their usual seats, Dad at the head of the table in his captain's chair, Mom to his right where she could catch his eye for silent communication. Justin slumped into the chair across from me, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Have you made a decision?" my father asked without preamble, cutting straight to the point as always. "We're running out of time here. Avery." I looked around the table at these 3 people who shared my DNA but felt like strangers. "I've been thinking about what you said about family money," I began carefully, my voice steady despite my racing heart. My mother's face brightened immediately. "So you understand, we're just asking you to contribute your share, like we've always done for you." The irony of her statement hung in the air. "Like they'd always done for me?" I almost laughed. "Actually," I said, reaching for the first envelope, "I've been reflecting on exactly how much I've contributed to this family over the years." I slid it across the table toward my father. "I thought you might be interested in seeing some data." Dad opened the envelope reluctantly, his movements slow and suspicious. He pulled out the spreadsheet, his eyes scanning the columns and rows. My mother leaned over to look while Justin continued staring at his hands, picking at a hangnail. "What's this supposed to be?" my father asked, though his voice had lost some of its earlier authority. "An accounting of all the money that's gone from me to this family over the years," I said simply. "Primarily to Justin, but some to all of you." My father's face flushed with anger. "You've been keeping score. What kind of daughter keeps a ledger on her own family?" "No," I corrected him, my voice remaining calm. "I've been keeping records. Bank statements, loan documents, credit reports. There's a difference." My mother's hand went to her throat as she read through the itemized list. "Avery, honey, surely it can't be this much, these numbers." $91,173, I stated, watching their faces carefully. "That's the conservative estimate, not counting inflation or opportunity costs." My father's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. This is ridiculous," he finally blustered. But I could see the impact the number had on him. The color had drained from his face, and his hands trembled slightly as he held the paper, for the first time since I'd arrived. Justin looked up from his hands, His eyes found the spreadsheet, and I watched his expression shift from defensive indifference to something resembling shame. His face crumpled as he read through the list, seeing his life laid out in stark financial terms. "Jesus," he whispered, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "That's your college fund at the top," I told him conversationally. "The one that was supposed to give me a debt-free start in life. See how the interest compounds over 15 years. That's what financial security looks like." My mother was crying now, soft tears rolling down her cheeks. "Avery, you never meant to what? Mom, to prioritize Justin over me for my entire life, to teach me that my needs don't matter as much as his wants." The kitchen fell silent except for the tick of the old clock on the wall and my mother's quiet sniffling. "Why are you doing this to us?" my mother asked through her tears, her voice breaking. "We're your family." The question hit me like a physical blow, but I forced myself to stay composed. This was the moment I'd been preparing for, the moment when I either caved to their emotional manipulation or finally stood my ground. "I'm doing this because I want all of you to understand exactly what's at stake here," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion churning inside me. "It's not just my apartment. It's 15 years of my financial security, my future, my life being sacrificed for Justin's poor choices." My father slammed his hand on the table, making my mother jump. "So, you're refusing to help. Your brother could end up dead. And you're sitting here worried about your damn bank balance." "I never said I wouldn't help," I replied, reaching for the second envelope. "I said I wouldn't sell my apartment." This caught their attention. My father's hand froze halfway to his coffee cup, and even Justin looked up with something resembling interest. "What do you mean?" my mother asked cautiously, hope creeping into her voice. I opened the second envelope with deliberate slowness, enjoying the moment of control I'd never had in this family. "These are my terms." My terms." My father's voice dripped with disdain. "We're family, not business associates. You don't get to dictate terms to us." "That distinction hasn't stopped you from treating my finances like a family resource for the past 15 years. I shot back, my composure finally cracking slightly. "So let's be clear about the arrangement this time." I laid out the first document, sliding it across the table like a poker player revealing her winning hand. "This is information about Meadowbrook Recovery Center. They have the highest success rate for gambling addiction in Connecticut. Justin will enroll in their residential program immediately and complete the full 90-day treatment." "I don't have a gambling addiction," Justin protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "I just had some bad luck with investments." I fixed him with a stare that made him shrink back in his chair. "You've lost over $150,000 gambling, Justin. You've stolen money from friends, lied to our parents, destroyed your credit, and now you're hiding from loan sharks. What exactly would you call that?" He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it, his shoulders sagging in defeat. I placed the second document on the table. "This is a formal loan agreement drafted by a lawyer. I will loan Justin $20,000, enough to cover his most pressing debts, the ones that pose an immediate threat to his safety. In return, he will sign this contract agreeing to repay the loan at 6% interest over 5 years. A contract." My mother looked horrified. "Between siblings, Avery. That's so cold." "Cold?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What's cold is draining your daughter's college fund and never paying it back. What's cold is watching your son destroy his life while you enable him every step of the way. This isn't cold. Mom, this is business." My father was scanning the loan agreement, his lawyer friend having taught him to read contracts carefully. 6% interest. You're going to profit off your brother's desperation." 6% is below market rate for someone with Justin's credit score, I replied. "If he went to a bank, which he can't because he's unemployable, he'd pay 20% if he could get approved at all." I placed the third document on the table. "And this is information about Dr. Patricia Williams, a financial counselor who specializes in addiction recovery. Justin will meet with her weekly for a minimum of 1 year to address the underlying issues that led to his gambling problem. Weekly therapy. Justin spoke up for the first time in several minutes. For a year, Avery. That's what recovery looks like. I interrupted. Real recovery. Not the Band-Aid solutions you've been getting from Mom and Dad. My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the linoleum floor. This is emotional blackmail. You're holding your brother's life hostage for your psychological experiments. No, I said, rising to face him. This is a boundary. I'm willing to help, but not in a way that perpetuates the problem, not in a way that teaches Justin that there are no real consequences for his actions. You have no right to dictate terms to your brother. My father continued, his face red with anger. You're not his parent, and neither are you, apparently, I shot back. Parents teach their children responsibility. They don't clean up every mess and pretend it never happened. The silence that followed was deafening. My father and I stood facing each other across the kitchen table. 15 years of unspoken resentment crackling between us like electricity. So what happens if I refuse? Justin asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. I turned to look at him. This broken shell of the brother I'd once idolized. Then I go back to Boston, and you figure out your own solution, just like I've been doing my entire adult life. But the loan sharks, my mother began, are Justin's problem. I finished. Not mine, not anymore. My father's face went through several expressions: anger, disbelief, calculation, and finally something that might have been respect. You're serious about this? Dead serious. He picked up the loan agreement again, reading through it more carefully this time. These terms, they're actually fair, more than fair. I'm not trying to punish Justin, I said, sitting back down. I'm trying to help him in a way that might actually work this time. But I'm done being the family ATM with no strings attached. My mother reached across the table, her hand hovering over mine. And if he completes the program, if he follows through with everything, then maybe we can start to be a real family, I said, one based on mutual respect instead of enabling and resentment. The kitchen fell quiet again, but this time the silence felt different, less hostile, more contemplative. I could see the wheels turning in their heads as they processed not just my terms, but the reality those terms represented. Finally, Justin spoke up, his voice shaky but determined. Where do I sign? Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Justin spoke. She's right. All three of us turned to look at him in surprise. What did you say? My father demanded. She's right, Justin repeated, louder this time. About all of it, the pattern, the enabling, my problem. He looked up, and for the first time, I saw my brother not the entitled child I'd grown up with, but a broken man who was finally seeing clearly. I've been jealous of you my entire life, Avery, he continued, his voice shaking. You were always the responsible one, the successful one. It was easier to keep screwing up and letting them fix it than to try and maybe fail on my own. My mother reached for his hand. Justin, honey, no, Mom, please. He pulled away gently. I need to say this. I've been running from this for too long, and I've been dragging all of you down with me. My father looked stunned. Justin, you don't have to agree to this. We'll find another way. There is no other way. Dad, Justin replied, a new resolve in his voice. Look at that spreadsheet. Look at what I've cost this family, what I've cost Avery. He turned to me, tears in his eyes. I'll sign the papers. I'll go to the program. I'll do whatever it takes. I just want you to be okay, my mother told him, now crying in earnest. I haven't been okay for a long time, he admitted. Maybe this is what I need. My father remained standing, his face a storm of conflicting emotions. He looked from the spreadsheet to me, then to Justin, struggling to process this shift in family dynamics. "So that's it?" he finally asked me. "These conditions are non-negotiable." "Yes," I confirmed. "This isn't about punishment or revenge. It's about breaking a destructive cycle." He picked up the spreadsheet again, staring at the total as if seeing it for the first time. The color had drained from his face as the reality of the situation finally seemed to sink in. $90,000, he murmured, almost to himself. "All this time." "It's not about the money," I said softly. "It's about recognizing patterns and changing them." For the first time in my adult life, I saw something new in my father's eyes when he looked at me. Not disappointment or expectation, but a glimmer of respect. Justin reached for the pen with a trembling hand. As he signed each document, I felt a weight lifting not just the immediate crisis, but the burden of unspoken resentment I'd carried for years. "I'll start the program on Monday," he said quietly, "and I'll find a way to pay you back, Avery. All of it. Not just this loan, but everything." My mother wiped her eyes. "We will too, honey. Your father and I. We'll start paying you back what we can." My father sat down heavily, the fight gone out of him. "We haven't been fair to you," he said finally. "Any of us." It wasn't a full acknowledgement of everything that had happened, but it was more than I'd ever received before. "I know this is hard," I said. "Change is hard. But we can't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results." As I drove home that evening, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: hope. Not just for myself, but for all of us. For the first time, we had a chance to be a real family, one built on mutual respect rather than enabling and resentment. The weeks following our confrontation were challenging. Justin enrolled in the gambling addiction program as promised, but the early days were brutal. He called me twice wanting to quit, overwhelmed by the emotional work of recovery. "I don't know if I can do this," he said during one particularly difficult call. "You can," I told him. "And you're not doing it alone." My parents maintained a strange distance at first, unsure how to navigate our relationship under these new terms. 3 weeks after signing the agreement, my mother called. "How are you, Avery?" Her voice was hesitant, almost timid. "I'm good. Mom, how are you and Dad doing?" "We're adjusting. Your father is still processing everything." She paused. "Justin hasn't missed a single session. He seems different." "That's good to hear." An awkward silence stretched between us, 15 years of unspoken tensions, impossible to address in a single conversation. "I've been thinking about what you said," my mother finally continued, "about patterns, and I think you might be right." The admission clearly cost her. "We haven't always been fair to you," she added quietly. "Thank you for saying that, Mom." And a week later, Justin called me directly, something he rarely did unless he needed money. The counselor suggested I make amends. He began awkwardly. "Part of the recovery process." "Okay," I said neutrally. "I've been a terrible brother." He continued. "I took advantage of you. Of Mom and Dad, too. But especially you. You were always the responsible one. And I resented you for it. For making me look bad by comparison." His candor surprised me. The Justin I knew would never admit vulnerability. "The program is helping," he added, as if reading my thoughts. "It's not just about gambling. It's about all the ways I've been avoiding responsibility." 3 months in, small changes began to accumulate. Justin not only attended his program faithfully, but secured a job at a small marketing firm, not the high-flying position he would have pursued in the past, but steady work with reasonable expectations. "It's the first time I've supported myself completely," he told me over coffee one Saturday. "It's terrifying, but also, I don't know, Satisfying? That's called being an adult, I teased gently. He smiled ruefully. Better late than never, I guess. During this time, I met Ethan Rodriguez at a financial literacy workshop I was conducting. He was a computer science professor with kind eyes and a thoughtful manner. Unlike previous partners who had been drawn to my caretaking tendencies, Ethan respected my boundaries and contributed equally to our relationship. Your career is part of who you are, Isiasdi, he said when I shared my family history. Why would anyone want you to diminish that? My relationship with my parents also began to evolve. My father started therapy, something I never thought I'd see, and began making modest monthly payments toward the debt documented in my spreadsheet. I've been learning about something called differentiation, he explained during one of our calls. It's about seeing your children as separate people with their own needs and identities. How's that going? I asked carefully. He sighed heavily. It's harder than I expected to change how you think after 65 years. But I'm trying, Avery. I want to do better. 6 months after that life-changing confrontation, I hosted a small dinner party in my apartment. Around my table sat my parents, Justin, Zoe, and Ethan. The same apartment I'd refused to sell now hosted a gathering that would have been impossible before. The conversation flowed more easily than I would have imagined. We didn't pretend the past hadn't happened, but neither did we dwell on it exclusively. We were learning a new way to be together, more honest, more respectful of boundaries, more authentic. Justin had just received a small raise at work and was faithfully making his loan payments. My parents had joined a support group for families of addicts and were slowly paying back what they could afford. The healing wasn't complete, perhaps it never would be entirely, but the transformation was real. As we finished dessert, my father cleared his throat, commanding attention in his characteristic way. I'd like to say something, he announced. The table fell silent, a hint of the old tension returning. 6 months ago, I thought family meant always saying yes, always coming to the rescue. He paused, visibly working to find the right words. I was wrong. Avery taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. He raised his glass, to boundaries, and to my daughter, who had the courage to set them. As glasses clinked around the table, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey wasn't over, but a crucial corner had been turned. By refusing to sacrifice my home, and by extension myself, I had helped create the possibility of a healthier home for all of us. The most powerful lesson I'd learned was that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop rescuing them. Setting boundaries hadn't destroyed my family, it had saved it. We were learning that love doesn't mean endless sacrifice or enabling destructive behavior. Real love sometimes means having difficult conversations and holding people accountable for their choices. I thought about the 17-year-old girl who had silently watched her college fund disappear, who had worked 3 jobs while her brother lived consequence-free. She couldn't have imagined that standing up for herself would eventually help her brother find his way to recovery. The apartment around us, every carefully chosen piece, every DIY improvement represented more than just property. It was proof that boundaries aren't walls that separate us, but foundations that allow healthy relationships to grow. Epilogue. 1 year later. A year after that fateful Sunday morning, my life had transformed in ways I never imagined possible. Justin had been promoted at work and was in a healthy relationship for the first time in years. My parents had learned to see both their children as independent adults worthy of respect. I was engaged to Ethan and had expanded my financial consulting practice to include a program for young adults recovering from family financial trauma, something I never could have pursued when all my emotional energy was consumed by family crises. The monthly transfers from my parents continued, small but consistent acknowledgments of the years of imbalance. Justin's loan payments arrived like clockwork, each one a step toward healing our relationship. As I looked around my apartment one quiet Sunday morning, the same apartment that had almost been sacrificed, I realized that the greatest gift I'd given my family wasn't financial. It was the demonstration that healthy boundaries create space for authentic love to flourish. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply say no. And sometimes that's exactly what your family needs to hear.